I couldn't begin this lecture on the WPA without discussing certain parallels in our time and back in the 1930s. The year may be 2025, but we are still having problems in the sense that the stock market is down, but food and all the other prices are up, and we don't know what we're going to do and what's going to happen, especially with all the rain. And so anyway, I wanted to bring up the parallels between that and what happened in 1929, right? A similar situation in our history occurred in 1929 when the stock market collapsed in October. Now, this is leading into the WPA. That's the reason why I'm discussing it. It left millions of people holding worthless paper. Everyone was affected in some way, even if you didn't own any stock. Home foreclosures, bankruptcies, and job loss was unprecedented. Your parents and grandparents may have told you the story of their trials in making ends meet. Many people lost their homes, many of them. There was very little, however, done to bolster the economy under Herbert Hoover. Meanwhile, a drought in the Midwest, which we're also going to talk about today, led to an abandoned farms and lost crops, resulting in the vast, what we call, Dust Bowl, all right? In 1932, FDR, and I don't have to say his whole name because you know who we're talking about, he's one of our most revered presidents, was elected to lead us. It was ironic that we elected a man strapped in a wheelchair who was able, with pluck, a happy demeanor, and the charm of a gentleman suitor, to begin to rebuild our nation and our faith in that nation. It's amazing. We had a crippled man, but he pulled us through it. Okay. The foundation of a safety net was laid in 1935, August 9th, with the Social Security, okay? But that we were not the first nation to give Social Security, because I found out that Germany had started Social Security for their elders in 1889. So we were not the first, okay, and also many other countries in Europe already had these social services in position, such as Sweden and Norway, but the Germans were the first with Social Security. All right, now, the foundation of a safety net was laid and programs instituted to get people working so their self-confidence could be restored, and that is the WPA, the Works Project Administration. The economy of the world also suffered. Winston Churchill warned that the Nazi regime in Germany was defying the rules of the Versailles Treaty. But we said, well, that's across the ocean. Forget it. We don't have to worry about that. Hitler was creating the greatest war machine the world had ever seen, but we were rightfully preoccupied with other problems, so Hitler got the go-ahead, all right? In 1939, as you know, Britain declared war on Germany, and in 1941, unbeknownst to us, our back was turned. In 1941, Pearl Harbor struck. All right, the Japanese struck us. We were ill prepared for that. The next day, FDR appeared in Congress and called it a day of infamy, and that phrase has stayed with us forever. We had only at that time a 90-day supply of rubber, and our own World War I vintage tanks were mothballed. Imagine that against Hitler's panzers. Now, throughout this whole war, we were never told of how shaky things were. For example, we only had 90 days worth of rubber, okay? We did not have enough steel or iron or whatever to start building tanks. The government ordered the Ford. Now, the government really took hold of all the production that was going on in this country. It had to be that way. And they ordered the Ford Motor Company to begin building tanks. And the Ford company said, well, how do we do it? So the government sent them a set of blueprints. They were forced to innovate and recreate themselves. In other words, look at the blueprints, figure it out, guys, all right? FDR desperately needed material. In his next speech, which is more famous and equally famous, in early 1942, I think it was February or March, he gave a speech and he talked about America being the arsenal of democracy. We are the arsenal. He didn't say we have to be the arsenal of democracy. We are the arsenal of democracy, even though we still did not have all the material or the knowledge to put this all together. Now, desperately needed everything from fabric, buttons for uniforms, zippers, leather for the shoes, fabric for the uniforms, and steel for the tanks. Where was he going to get all the stuff he needed, including buttons and zippers? Well, he did a very intelligent thing. He decided who would know how to get all this stuff, and then he thought of the Sears Roebuck catalog. So he hired the man who was in trust of the Sears catalog, because this guy knew supply. He could get supply from anywhere. So this is the way, and that man was only supposed to work for him for about a year, but he stayed, I believe, throughout the whole war. Now, so this man had channels to procuring almost everything. So with grit and determination and many lost lives, we won the war. That generation had been molded by the Great Depression and hardened by a world war, but their characters and strength had been burnished, and they have been called the greatest generation. It's not us, it's your parents and your grandparents who were the greatest generation, okay? We are their descendants, and despite the uncertainty, we too will emerge from this stronger and changed for the better. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the WPA. It was authorized by Congress in 1935, the same year he put in the Social Security. He did all these things were done within a period of 90 days. It was amazing what this man was able to do. And of course, he always kept the press on his side. He was always friendly with the press. They would come in, they say, "Hello, Mr. President." He'd say, "Hello, boys." Now he said, "You know, I might be a little tired today, but we're not going to talk about that, are we?" "Oh, no, Mr. President," they would say. "Oh, good heavens, no." He was so wonderful to them. They were his allies, for God's sake. He had to keep them on his side and not make them, report something negative about him. All right, now, so the Federal Art Project, a part of the WPA, from 1935 to 1943, they employed artists by the government, and they received a stipend of $23 to $35 a week, depending upon their experience. Now, the old Perth Amboy High School, I think it's there. I don't know if it's used as an administration building right now, but if you go into their auditorium, all those pictures that you see were done during the WPA project. And a few years ago, when I was still in Perth Amboy, I was a high school librarian. Frank Sinatra asked me, "Marianne, do you think you'd do some research on the WPA project?" Because he knew I had a master's in art history. I said, "Well, sure, Mr. Sinatra." I said, "I'll have to go through all the documentation, with the Board of Education." So I got all these papers that were in the night. I'm pouring through these papers. In not one paper did they mention the WPA project, which was active at that time. So I had to tell Mr. Sinatra, I said, "I can't find anything in the archives." I said, "I just can't find it." So anyway, now, these artists were hired to decorate schools, post offices, libraries. Even the children's library in Perth Amboy they came in and did pictures of the children, pictures like the fairy tales and whatnot, and other public buildings, including Newark Airport, where Arshile Gorky did his famous mural, which was eventually painted over. And they also established CCC camps, in other words, to replenish the trees and whatnot so that it would hold the soil, right? And the Federal Works Project also did roads, and the Roosevelt Hospital was done at that time as well. There was also a Federal Writers Project. 3,600 artists participated, and it was non-discriminatory because there were men and women as well. 16,000 works of art were created in 1,000 cities across the country. This was the largest government-supported effort to bolster the arts. The NEA is an outgrowth of the WPA, or the National Education, National EA. Yeah, okay. The WPA did not distinguish between abstract or representational art. Both were equally American, but more representational artists were hired. Artists were given the opportunity to paint full-time and develop their style without having to worry about putting food on the table. It also created an esprit de corps among artists who interacted and learned from each other. Much of the work was mediocre, and though it was primarily a relief measure, it was not welfare. They knew that they were working for something, for a goal, and it was not welfare that they were being given. And the WPA created something, and there was pride in that creation and their work. It gave us a sense of hope and purpose. The boost given to artists through this effort lasted through much of the rest of the century, and their work is in museums for us to enjoy today. Art exhibits also promoted the people to be aware of art. Government support implied that art was important to a free society. The WPA was officially terminated actually until June 30th, 1943. So even into the First and Second World War, because they were doing posters and whatnot, war posters and that kind of thing. They needed that stuff again to, keep the troops happy. Now, in 1937, Achille Gorky painted 10 panels, 1,500 square feet of painting in the Newark airport. 2 of the paintings survived under 14 layers of paint in the old terminal. They managed to scrape off some canvas or something and the canvas had been painted over. So they managed to scrape that off, and they found Achille Gorky's paintings underneath. And it was restored. And what they found is today in the Newark Museum. So you have to go to Newark, and you would find there's a few of the panels. I believe there's 2 of them that survived. Okay, so now we're going to get started here. The regionalists. We're going to talk about Thomas Hart Benton and his wife. Thomas Hart Benton was born in 1889 in Missouri. His father wanted him to be a lawyer and a politician, but the mother supported his artistic ambitions. In 1908, he was at the Art Institute of Chicago, which still is a very prestigious organization. And in 1911, from 1908 to 1911, he studied in Paris at the Académie Julienne, but he was never quite comfortable with the Parisian aesthetics, even though he met Diego Rivera there, who was also part of the Rockefeller project that we might talk about, and Stanton McDonald Wright in Paris. He returned to New York and settled in New York City, where he stayed for most of the rest of his life. In the 1920s, he took travels throughout the United States, did a lot of sketching, and it came out with a mature regionalist style emerges because he called himself an enemy of modernism. He did a lot of exploring of his own roots, but his style never changed. He was a friend of Grant Wood and also of Jim Curry. Now, in 1922, he marries a woman named Rita Piacenza, who had been his student. They continued to live in New York City. He was the teacher of Jackson Pollock and also Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper, the actor. Now, also, Dennis Hopper was also a pupil of Andy Warhol. But Andy Warhol also painted his picture. But Dennis Hopper was an art student of Benton and Warhol as well. He was a hard-drinking man, very flamboyant and opinionated, and he alienated himself from the New York circle. He lived in New York City and in Martha's Vineyard, where he died in 1975. He was receptive to Marxism, but that's not unusual because in the 1920s, the socialist theories of the 20s were the socialist theories of the 1920s were, as many artists also embraced them. In 1930, he did a series of 10 murals commissioned by the New School for Social Research, and that was completed and hung in January of 1931. Benton received no money for this except for the expenses. Now, he used a lot of egg tempera paint, so he needed an awful lot of eggs because you have to use egg yolks and egg tempera. So I hope the eggs were a whole lot cheaper then than they were now, because oh boy, no, you wouldn't want to do egg tempera now. Okay, now okay. So in December, now in 1931. 30 years ago, the panels were sold to the AXA Insurance Company, which put all the panels in their library. But in December of 2012, they were donated to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which was a wonderful thing for them to do, and they were hung in 2014 after certain conservatorship. I mean, you have to, maybe make little adjustments and little. If there's a little cut in the canvas, you have to fix that and arrange it. The egg tempera was on a gesso ground. Gesso is almost like plaster. Okay, it's almost like a plaster, and it was lit. The linen panels were then mounted on wood with a honeycomb interior. I'm sorry. So I'm going to start showing you these pictures. The instruments of power. This panel shows one of the prime qualities of Benton's work: dynamic, rhythmic, and a bit of turmoil thrown in. This is the reason why you are going to see things like this on every painting, to kind of separate it, because otherwise it would be very, very difficult to read. So he did that, and it was a good thing that he did, all right? The train, the plane, the turbine, the electric tower, and the dam with an airship sailing on the right there, sailing out. And here is the steam, this engine coming this way with this and belching a lot of smoke. So you have one thing going one way, one thing coming the other way, and it's very dynamic, okay? The gray molding set the areas of the panel to make them easier to comprehend. He creates rhythm, dynamism, and a compact composition with tactile senses and bulges and recessions. Here is the next one. Benton, city activities with the subway. Benton's figures derive from Michelangelo and El Greco. The figures are elongated and the contours are exaggerated. For example, in Michelangelo's David statue, his musculature is very bulgy, okay? Now, we also see a burlesque show going on and a couple necking there, and there's another woman with her hands raised. You know, they went to these revival meetings in the 30s. That was a big thing in the 1930s, right? Okay. And here's another one. Now there we see a couple dancing. There were marathons in those days, in the 1930s, when couples would go to the dance floor, and the one couple that held out probably got a gift, and it was usually money, and it was usually something between $5 and $10. But when you had no money in the 30s, $10 was an awful lot of money. And some couples would actually dance for 12 or 13 hours in order to get that amount of money. Now, the exaggerated contours tend to flatten the figures, and we also see alternatives of light and dark. Now, in the front there's a circus of somebody flying on the trapeze, and below that we see couples. Look at this. There's a woman in a bar. I mean, women never went into the bars, but when women were finally, shall we say, released from their corsets in the 1920s, they decided they could do anything, and that means going into a bar and having a drink. Okay, so that was the beginning of the women's liberation movement. All right, now.
They had to go in through the women's entrance.
Sorry?
A women's only entrance and then the men's entrance. They couldn't use one door.
Okay, let me note right now. Next one is, oh yeah. This is called, oops, I'm sorry. This is called the changing West. Well, things were changing. Movie making, oil rigs, industrial welding, and turbine contrast with the cowboys, okay? The old Western building and a windmill with sheep and cattle ranching. He was interested in capturing the changes in 20th century America. All this before the Depression and the Dust Bowl. This was still reflecting the 1920s, because you can see that the movie there, you know what that movie probably is? The movie from 1929 called Wings, when they had these planes going up and they were that's an old movie from sometimes it's on, I think, Turner Classic Movies, but it's called Wings. And because they had planes in the air, and this was not, you know, like an artificial thing. They actually had the planes in the air and they were filming it, and so they could use it in the film. Now here is the Deep South. Cotton, horse, and paddle wheeler represent the Old South on the right there. And the oil refinery, farm mechanism, and black labor represents the New South. Now, Benton included workers of both races in his murals. And that's what he should have done. And it was a good choice. We have a broad panorama of diversity in our nation. And he celebrates the American experience. Now here's the Midwest. Well, mechanized agriculture with grain silos and a logging industry. Benton celebrated America. Now, one of my teachers at Rutgers was a man named Matthew Bagel, and he wrote of this. He compares him to John Trumbull, who painted the history of early America. His works decorate the inside of our Capitol. And it was one of the things we were worried about on January 6th, that the artwork, some of the artworks were vandalized. But the one thing that was not vandalized was the first painting of George Washington, which was in another room. Okay, we're going to talk about that very shortly, much more shortly than you think. Okay, now, all right, this one, building cities. Constructing a skyscraper on the left, could that possibly be the Empire State Building? Now, even though the Depression had come, they continued to build the Empire State Building, because they knew that you don't abandon it. People are looking for it. They're watching every day, and you didn't abandon it, because then that would imply that it couldn't be finished, because they didn't have the money. So they kept on building it with the idea that it would be something to uplift our spirits. All right, now the next one. Benton, steel, okay. The entire panel is devoted to the building material of the 20th century, the steel industry. The industry thrived in this country until the 1970s, when the jobs began to move away and they closed up all those huge ovens or furnaces that they use, okay? And much of it went, as you know, to Asia. The strong contrast of dark and light lend themselves perfectly to the subjects, and you can see that. By the way, Jackson Pollock, who was Benton's student, was a model for one of the steel workers. I think it might be the one on the right, but I'm not sure, okay? Now, we're going to start talking about someone else that Benton knew. His name was James Stewart Curry. And this is one of his first paintings, Tornado over Kansas in 1929. He was born in Kansas and worked at the Art Institute of Chicago. That's probably where he met Benton, okay? In 1926, he went to Paris, and in 1936, he's an artist in residence at the Agricultural School of the University of Wisconsin. The murals commissioned followed. Curry portrays here a tornado as the family seeks shelter in what they call the tornadoes or the storm cellar. He portrays the heroism of a Middle West farmer. Scenes of disaster befalling man who survives through grit and determination. Now, many of these people had to abandon their homes. They had to because there was absolutely nothing there, and it was such drought. And they all took off and they went west. All right, now, here is the next one. Curry's tragic prelude. He portrays here John Brown's raid in Kansas as a prelude to the Civil War. This was not well received by Kansans, by the way. The heroic, if manic, figure of Brown with Bible and guns, which were called Beecher Bibles, all right? The tornado symbol of woe was to come as settlers headed west to escape the fiery Holocaust. In other words, it's fire and fury that we see right here. In 1940, this was commissioned by Life magazine to document the 1927 Mississippi River flood. Hoover was the Secretary of Commerce at the time. That was president, well, he was still, not the president, he was the Secretary of Commerce. Flanked by the newsmen, who you see there, and the swirling bound water was threatening to engulf the animals, if not yet engulfing the people. The rescue boat is filled with black people. The man with an upraised arm appeals to heaven. The woman in the center, there is a woman in the center right about here. She is like the Madonna in the painting. She's feeding her baby, and again, and there was also a Red Cross station for aid. Obviously, the lady has lost her home, and she's gone to wherever she can to take care of her child. The emotions are over the top with this tragic prelude. And we have sympathy for the suffering, not only the people, but the animals as well. And everyone is being totally overwhelmed here. Now, Curry also, for 6 weeks, Curry ran away with the Ringling Circus. He did many paintings, including the Flying Wallendas, but unfortunately, I could not get reproductions of them as the works are privately owned, and when I got them on the screen and I tried to copy them, they would fuzz out, okay? All right, so this is the one lithograph that I found of circus elephants, and it looked very interesting to me because to think that he ran away with the circus, it's very interesting. Now, we're going to start with a new aspect of this lecture with the social realists, the artists primarily from New York, that began creating history, creating paintings which reflect the times of the 1930s and early 40s. Here's the first one. This is by Moses Sawyer. It's called Artists on WPA in 1935. This is one of the few pictures that were done of the actual people themselves. The panels set the stage for the artists at work. The presence of 3 women indicates the WPA was fair to both sexes. The quality of work varies, but it was a definitive step forward in supporting art. And much of the art that we see today is based on the artists from the 1930s and 1940s who passed on their skills to artists after them. One of the few actual paintings of artists at work, though I know that many pictures were taken. Now, Sawyer had a brother, Raphael. They were twins, all right? And this is Raphael's picture. Oh, dear me, this is, all right, here. The Mission in 1933. 1933 to 35 were terrible years for us in America. Raphael, Moses' twin brother, did this lithograph of unemployed men having a simple repast. It appears that they are having coffee with a piece of bread, which wasn't exactly the greatest thing to eat, but all right, there's nothing else, you have to eat it. The image represents what was happening throughout the country, not only in New York. The men's faces are in shadow. They don't communicate with each other. When you have problems, you keep it to yourself and you just block everything else out. As their despair is kept to themselves. The societal norms were different in the 1930s. If you had a problem, you didn't go and advertise it. Today, every actress or whatever, anybody will go and they will spill their guts on television. But in those days, that was not the thing to do. All right, now look at this. Here is Sawyer again. The women in the workforce going to work in 1936. One did not give up a job if you had one in the 1930s. But note the shadowy man behind them. A careworn workman looking at the others who were going to work. Desperation was closer than you think. I think this is a very, very telling picture. They're not looking at him, but he's looking at them. He's looking at them. And we see three or four girls going into an office, and he is standing there looking. Now here's another one. This is by Reginald Marsh. It's called "No One Has Starved." It's a lithograph, and yeah, nobody has starved. But look at those men. They're all kind of pushed in together, aren't they? And they look like they're all the same. There is no difference in the pose. They're all looking forward. They're all wearing hats. Well, and you get the impression that they are kind of like a lost generation. They all look the same. And they are all they're squashed into the painting. There's no room for them to move at all. This is something he did deliberately, okay? Because there's nowhere to go. Absolutely nowhere. So again, through the composition, he gives you the desperation of these people, just the way he composes it. And it's not in bright colors, it's in black and white. And if you notice too, the faces some of them are even obscured with the hats and are looking away or whatever. Now, here's another one. This is called Marsh's painting called The Jungle. Now, we know it's not the jungle. It's probably somewhere in an American city, maybe New York, maybe Philadelphia, maybe who knows where. But here, these people are basically living in a garbage dump because there's no other place to go. And you can see the garbage right there and all the garbage around them. And again, it's a crowded in. There is no private space around you. You're crowded in with these people, all right? There's no alternative. There was absolutely no alternative. Nobody would go to something like this if there was an alternative. Now, fortunately, today there are alternatives, starting with the Social Security of 1935. Here's another one. This is Barnett Newman, who was to do a lot of lithographs. Now again, basically the entire composition is a circle. Start with the man's hand at the very top and go around the arm and it goes right back to the hat, all right? He is obviously in despair. He's put his head down, maybe to get a couple moments, 10 or 15 minutes of rest. Maybe he is working, but this was his lunch break, and he's decided to get a little bit of rest because it's been such hard work. But this, again, shows you well, wait a minute, idle hands means he doesn't have a job. I'm sorry, idle hands, he doesn't have a job. He's not working. He is in despair. Again, the same desperate position, the same desperate pose that's of somebody that has lost someone or something terrible has happened to them. Now, the next person we're going to be talking about is this man, Jack Levine. Jack Levine, in contrast to Sawyer, Jack Levine's work is a stinging, vitriolic satire. The faces are almost animalistic, and there was a certain kind of snugness here. Now, this is called Welcome Home in 1946. All right? So in other words, these are people that have been welcomed back home. But what we see is overfed, corrupted individuals. Note the title, Welcome Home. They're welcome, but I don't think you're going to be welcome over there, all right? They have not fought in the war. They have simply benefited from it. That's what he's trying to tell us. Levine includes a general with a huge medal on his jacket. His social realism with his outrage imposed upon the subject matter. It is very expressionistic. By the way, Levine lived to be 95 years old. He died in 2010. Many of the WPA were socialists, and many may have been communists, but given the politics of the 1930s, this was not unusual. Many were still enthralled to the Russian Revolution as extolled by John Reed, who you know is buried in Moscow, okay? And John Reed gave these glowing reports of what was going on in Russia, and many people believed them and they embraced it. Now here's the next one. Election night. Levine never lost his edge. Here are the winners and we're the losers. The entire scene is replete with corruption. The fat cats, the overdressed wives, the mistresses, the cigarette girl dressed as a prostitute. He never changed his nocturnal, shadowy colors. Now, it's very, very hard to read it. You've got to look at it a little bit. He never changed his style of painting. He left it that way, okay? Because I think he wanted you to have to search and look at it and make your own decision about it. Now, here's another one. Again, now here he's basically he's adopted a little bit of the Picasso cubism, because obviously this is a pawn shop, because there's somebody's pawned a horn, you know, and you can see a lot of other stuff there. One man has just come out. He's putting the money in his pocket, but the other one is ready to go into the pawn shop. The two men outside the pawn shop are in the Lower East Side on the Bowery. I'm sure they would be guys from the Bowery, all right? One has emerged with money in his can, while the other one takes turns to enter. The seamy side of life of the underclass and the downtrodden was what Levine always identified himself with, okay? So, but this too, there's a lot of gold there, but there's also a lot of dark shadows. So you have to kind of figure out what's going on. And the only thing that you see that trumpet there, and there's a lot of other things. There's another instrument up there, and there's a shadow. It looks like it might be a chair or a ladder up at the light part of the yellow. And the sun, of course, the sun in the Bowery, the streets are so narrow that you get patches of sun. You don't get a full sun on, you see. Now, here is another thing that Levine did, and this was in 1946, right after the war. This seriograph was produced by the CIO, which was the Council of Industrial Organizations, which later merged with the it merged about 20 years ago or 30. This is a public interest message. It was straightforward. The images are readily understandable, exhorting the blacks to vote, the only way that reactionaries' grip can be loosened. It was a prescient image. because the battle for civil rights began after the World War II. The soldiers said, well, if I'm good enough to fight for my country, aren't I good enough to have a job? And they were right, without a doubt. Now, here is what we're going over to another artist, Ben Shahn. Now, this was the Passion, it's called The Passion of Sacco and Vanzetti in 1931. American intellectuals and socialists rallied to the cause of two Italian anarchists accused of murdering a postal employee. The trial was racist because they were from Italy, okay? And at that time we only allowed certain number of people coming in from Europe. This is, remember, 1931, okay? Now, the trial was racist, and despite the protests, they were executed. Shahn places their bodies before a justice building. The man in the academic dress there is President Lowell of Harvard, who was an avowed racist who encouraged quotas and was the chairman of the commission that reviewed the sentence. Flanking him is the president of MIT on the right, on that side, and on the opposite side, a retired judge. Now, there's another man in the window there of the Justice Department, and Judge Webster Thaler in the window there presided over the trial and vowed to get these radical Italians. Felix Frankfurter, who was a well-known lawyer in those days and well-known even into the 1960s, I think he died about 50 years ago, attempted to get their sentences overturned on the basis of questionable evidence. It was not to be. This is one of a series of 23 gouache paintings that he did, all right? All right, Ben Shahn again, the Riveter. Shahn and his wife, Bernarda Bryson Shahn, began a series of 13 murals for the Bronx Post Office entitled Resources of America. Again, this was still in the 1930s they were doing. This is one of them. We see the labor as one of our resources. The building, now right now, this has happened a few years ago. The building that was put in, this was done in the bank, as I told you. The building is up for sale. I don't know if it was sold, but there was a movement to have the lobby as a landmark. Now, the building's exterior was declared a landmark in 1976, but not the mural. Now, I don't know what happened to the mural. It was an article in the New York Times, and the picture that I'm going to show you, is a picture from the New York Times. There are the people at the bank, and that right there is the mural from the 1930s. I don't know what happened to the mural because the Times never reported on it afterward. But I wanted to put that in there for you to show you that these murals still exist, and this is in a bank. So, all right, now let's go on. Years of Dust. You have not resettlement, and also you have not converted a man because you have silenced him. All right, and this, of course, is Years of Dust, and it shows a poor farmer sitting, and there's somebody in the house looking out. And he's sitting there, and there was the resettlement administration to try and get these people back to work and back to a decent life. Now, Shahn had worked for Diego Rivera's as Diego Rivera's assistant for the Rockefeller Center mural that was ordered destroyed because I think they had the picture of who was it? He painted a picture of and I don't remember. It was one of the socialists was in the picture, and he was asked. Diego Rivera was asked to cover it up, and he said, "No, I won't." And Rockefeller said to him, "Okay, here's your money. Please leave." He left, and they destroyed the mural. And that's what happened to it, okay? Now, but Diego Rivera went to Mexico and he recreated the mural there, all right? So it's, now, in 1935, here is Sean. In 1935, at the suggestion of Walker Evans, he became a photographer for the Farm Services Administration, documenting the South and the migrants. Sean was an avowed liberal throughout his life. Now, the second poster deals for the CCC, the camps advocating freedom of speech for all. It is strongly worked with clenched fists, closed mouth, and eyes, bespeak the tension produced when one cannot speak his mind for fear that there would be retribution. All right? Okay, now, here's the next one. Register to vote. Again, Ben Shahn. For all these rights we have just begun to fight. This voting poster was done after World War II. You see, oh, I didn't have the year there. Oh, because I don't have it. I'm sorry. It was done after World War II to encourage black people to register. The title refers to blacks winning the right to fight in the war. We know there was a wonderful cadre of the black pilots who had a absolutely marvelous. They were fabulous. They were well trained, and they just, it was absolutely fabulous. It truly was. And I think the last man just died a few weeks ago. I don't know his name, but it was in the New York Times, and I saw it. And he was the last of the black pilots to die, and he was like 97 or 98. So anyway. Now, again, a lot of people are dying from World War II there. They say that there's still about 1,500 men alive. I didn't think there was that many. But that was the last figure I read, and I said, gee, that seems like an awful lot, you know? So anyway, now, they had the blacks had won the right to fight in the war. Now they had to fight for their civil rights. Okay, we're going to leave this now, because we're going to go to this lady, Dorothea Lange, and I have chosen her because she was born in Montclair, New Jersey, and I kind of like putting things, I'm a Jersey girl. I've been a Jersey girl all my life, and I had my education here. I was born here, had my education here, and I'm still here. So I chose her out of all the photographers because I wanted to have, first of all, a woman. And I also wanted to have somebody from New Jersey, okay? She was born in Hoboken, and at the age of 7, she contracted polio. At the age of 12, the father left the family, okay? She studied photography at Columbia University Studio in San Francisco, but she talked about her leg. And I'm going to read to you what she said when she was interviewed about it. You see, she's sitting on the car there, and that was the car she had. She had an assistant to help her, and she was paid a stipend for the two of them of $4 a day. Can you imagine $4 a day? You can't buy anything. You can barely buy a candy bar today is $1.99. I mean, you know, $4 a day for her and her companion, so they could eat breakfast and lunch, and you know, if she had to get some supplies, she could buy supplies. All right. Now, she talks about her leg. Quote, it formed me, guided me, instructed me, helped me, and humiliated me. Lange once said of her altered gait because she limped very badly. I've never gotten over it, and I am aware of the force and power of it, unquote. Now, she married Maynard Dixon, who was a Western painter in 1920, and she had 2 sons. By 1934, she was doing photos documenting the migrants of California with Paul Taylor, a University of Berkeley for California Relief Agency. She was doing this for California Relief Agency that was connected with UC Berkeley, okay? Now, she divorced her husband and she married Taylor in 1935. But she never, her husband, her first husband, was an artist and he taught her composition. And it was absolutely wonderful. Now, in 1935, she's working for the Farm Services Administration, documenting rural poverty, and for the next 5 years with photos and data gathering. The other guy was gathering the data and she would do the photos, okay? Again, they were allowed $4 a day, per day expenses for herself and Ron Partridge, and they worked primarily in the Imperial Valley of California. In June of 1937, Life magazine ran one of her pictures uncredited in an article about the Dust Bowl. Now, she did this picture looks very, very good to us. It's not fuzzy or anything, because she used a particular type of development. She used what is called a gelatin silver print. This is a light-sensitive print that has silver on it, and the halides in gelatin on film, which when rinsed off in the processing, leave a silver image to be printed on paper, which also contains these silver halides. That's the reason why the pictures look so good. It's a special process that she had to go through. Now, this is probably her most famous work. There it is, Migrant Mother. We all are very, very famous, and we know this. By the way, that lady's name was Florence Thompson, and it was done in 1936. Now, she gave an interview to a photography magazine just about a year before she died, and she talked about this work, this painting, not painting, the photograph here. And she tells a little bit about the way she photographed people, okay? She said, "I saw and approached the hungry and desperate mother as if drawn by a magnet. I do not remember how I explained my presence or my camera to her, but I do remember she asked me no questions." Naturally, she had her own problems, okay? "I made 5 exposures, working closer and closer from the same direction. I did not ask her name or her history. She told me her age, that she was 32. She said that they had been living on frozen vegetables from the surrounding fields and birds that the children killed. She had just sold the tires from her car to buy food. So she's stuck. She can't get away, all right? There she sat in that lean-to tent with her children huddled around her and seemed to know that my pictures might help her, and so she helped me. This was a sort of equality about it. This comes from Popular Photography in February of 1960. So, you see the despair, you see the children, they're little children like that still want to be with their mother, and they hid their faces. She also has a baby in her arms, and you wonder, where is her husband? He probably has walked out or whatever. Maybe he's off, I don't know, trying to get a job. I don't want to implicate that he left her because I don't know what happened. Now, this is the next one here. All right, child and mother. This was done in Wapato in the Yakima Valley of Washington in 1939. Now, they were going all over, California, Washington, etc. Again, getting evidence for what was happening so they could give this to the government. The mother and child are placed far away from each other in isolation and hopelessness. Lang would ask, now here's the way she did this. Lang would ask if she could take their pictures, and if they acquiesced, she walked away. She didn't want them posing. She didn't want them posing. You know, like, you want to take my picture? Oh, I've got to pose. No, she didn't want that. She would walk away, but then she would come back and try to catch them at a moment when they were unawares. Now, this is very telling. The little girl is holding on to the barbed wire. So in other words, they're trapped. These 2 people are trapped. The mother is in the background. She's not supporting or with the daughter because, quite frankly, she's just looking out, and she she is desperate herself, and she's maybe trying to figure out why this lady is here taking their pictures, and what is she going to do? How is she going to feed that child? What is she going to give her for lunch or breakfast or whatever? I had a friend who told me that during the Depression, when she went to the neighbor's house, the neighbor's daughter was eating ketchup sandwiches. And she said to her mother, she's eating ketchup sandwiches. And the mother said, I don't want you going there anymore, honey. Because that's what the mother was feeding the child, a ketchup sandwich. I don't think any of us have ever eaten a ketchup sandwich, have we? No, we wouldn't. Fortunately, we don't have to eat a ketchup sandwich. Okay. So these little things that you hear from people are little things that it's not in a book, but it gets carried on. That's why I'm telling you about it, okay? Now, the wire fence is emblematic of their plight. They're stuck. They can't do anything. Now, here's the next one. This is interesting because it captures another America. Note the antiquated gas pump and all the ads for cigarettes. I mean, nobody had any money, but they had all these ads for cigarettes in 1937. In all these photos, the people seem to be waiting it out because there was nothing more to do. The porch is held up with stones. Notice that there's 3 steps to the porch, but if one of those stones falls out, the porch is going to collapse. So she deliberately put that in the picture to show you that that was on the verge of collapse. I mean, she was absolutely brilliant with these photographs. She truly was. And she didn't realize, of course, that she was capturing, first of all, this looked like a kind of a ramshackle building, but she was also capturing all the cigarette ads, which fortunately we don't see anymore, or very little anyway. And I've seen, you know, people even collect those gasoline things. They collect them. That thing with the star, that is people collect those. When they find it, they actually buy it and use it in their home, or just put it in the front, and everybody comes and says, where'd you get that, you know? So anyway, I thought that's really interesting. And again, she did it deliberately that way. And notice she even cut off the other side, the way the impressionists did. And also, oh yeah, look, Coca-Cola. There is Coca-Cola. You know what else during the 1930s? I'm going to tell you this. It was something I was going to use 2 months hence, but I'm going to tell you something. Do you know what happened on April 6th of 1930? You don't know. Well, on that day in 1930, they introduced Hostess cupcakes. The Hostess cupcake, and people went crazy for it. The Hostess Twinkie. It was the Hostess Twinkie. Those 2 things that are introduced in 1930. I think they're still making the Hostess Twinkies, and I bet they're filled with an awful lot of preservatives. So I would suggest you not eat them. But in the 1930s and 1930, the middle of the Depression, they're introducing Hostess Twinkies. Okay, now let's go on. Here are 2 pictures. The first one is called The Damaged Child. I didn't name it that. That's the name it was given, all right? The place was a place called Shacktown in Emerald Grove, Oklahoma in 1936. And the other one is an ex-slave, it says ex-slave with long memory from Alabama in 1937. Now, when you look at that little girl, you see that she needs an awful lot. First of all, she needs some medical attention. She also needs a dress, okay? And let's hope it'll be a clean dress. Obviously, and she's so thin, she needs a good meal, doesn't she? Yeah, that's and she paints her against a building that looks like it's kind of collapsing. It's got shingles that are falling off. But it's truly, truly pathetic to see something like that. a child that's that hungry and has no medical care and nothing else, quite frankly. And when you're denied nourishing food at that age, when you get to be older, you can have a lot of problems, I think, because you didn't get the calcium, the magnesium, the whatever, that you need, and all the milk that you drink and all that stuff, and they just didn't get it. All right, and there is the slave. It says she is an ex-slave with a long memory, and the old woman is still tending those fields, though. There's no Social Security because that became a law in 1935, and she may very well not have qualified for it unless she had done some work. I don't know how much work you had to have done to get Social Security, but I believe it was probably started at around maybe $5 a month, something like that. I can't say that it's that way, but it appears to me that $5 would give you $1.25 a week. So I don't know, but I'm just speculating on that. Now here is an interesting picture because she aligns herself with the Impressionists. She cuts off the two guys that are sitting on either side of this man, okay? This is called Jobless on the Edge of a Pea Field in the Imperial Valley of California. The defiance of these men for whom there is no work. Note the cutoff figures. They must all have been sitting in a row, but she just took one of them and just gives you the hint of the other two guys sitting on the opposite side. Lang's first husband, Maynard Dixon, must have stressed the importance of composition because her composition was fabulous. Lang was also apprenticed to a number of New York photo studios, including a well-known one by the man named Arnold Genthy, but I don't know anything about him. But if she worked in New York City with photography, they probably gave her a lot of pointers, and that's probably the reason why she used the gelatin prints, because they told her these prints will come out much better than your average from an average camera and using cheap paper. Yes?
I'm just looking at the rows of peas, and they form the perspective to force you to look at the
That's right. That's right. You could see they're in a field. The field is empty. There's rows of nothing but dirt there. And I'm glad you noticed that because I'm going to show you another one very similar to this. And this is the most fabulous composition. The next two pictures are my favorites. I know I like the one with Florence Thompson. You can empathize with her. But the next two are, to my mind, even more so. This is tractored out in 1938. There is a small house, and I don't know if the wind must have tractored that out, or maybe it was the tractor going back and forth, but it is absolutely marvelous. It's a masterful composition of an abandoned prairie home with the furrows completely engulfing it and adding to the isolation of that house, if you want to call it. It's not really a house, but anyway, let's call it a house. Did the Dust Bowl actually etch these furrows in that way? Natural emotion, or was it natural erosion of something already there? I don't know. But look at that, and the way your eye is taken into the painting, and there is nothing behind that. There is no even a suggestion of, let's say, a gopher or a dog or a cat or a bird flying across. She wanted absolute isolation, and that's what you got there, okay? When I looked at that, it's unbelievable. And the shadows, the shadow and the light, the shadow and the light, the shadow and the light, and how those curves are almost going completely around. It's just, God, it's unbelievable, truly. Now, this is the next one, which I love. Woman of the High Plains, Texas, 1939. This sad, despairing woman becomes monumental, yet vulnerable, outlined against the sky. Note the clouds echoing her elbow. Look at that. And this, obviously the picture is taken up, looking up at her, okay? So that she looks monumental, but she is so thin, and that dress looks like it's been worn for the last 10 years, and the expression on her face, it's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable that she could capture her like that. Again, in isolation. Her dress is threadbare from so many washings, but notice her strong arms were used to hard work, and she appears almost on the verge of tears. And she is older than her time. I don't know how old she is, but I'm sure she's looking older. And of course, she's standing in the Texas sun, which just beats down on you so brutally. She's not wearing a hat or any protection against the sun. And that one and Tractored Out are my two favorites. That's why I saved it for last. The other one is wonderful. It's wonderful. I'm not trying to knock it down. But to me, these two are even more. The isolation, the aloneness, the grieving, it's fabulous, truly fabulous. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the abstract expressionist, and I'm going to show three pictures by Jackson Pollock, all right, because he's kind of a bridge between the 1930s and coming into the 1950s and 60s, okay? This was one of his first paintings, Pollock, Going West from 1935 to 1934. He was born in 1912 and he died in 1956. He was an alcoholic, an unregenerate alcoholic. He was born in Wyoming in 1912, and his alcoholic father abandoned the family when Pollock was 8 years old. He was a very needy child, but got very little attention. In 1930, he went to New York City with his older brother Charles, and both of them studied with Thomas Hart Benton, who became a father figure to him and got him to focus his energy. Benton called him a damn fool for drinking. There were violent fights. He was a very, very violent man. Benton and his wife Rita gave him a home that he never had. He fell in love with Rita. In 1936, Benton was in Missouri and Pollock moved into their New York apartment. He was very violent when he was drunk, and he threatened his sister-in-law once with an axe. So, you wouldn't invite him. You wouldn't invite him to your house, not even for a cup of coffee. Okay. Now, in 1937, he went into psychiatric therapy, Jungian therapy for alcoholism. Now, I don't know how psychiatric therapy can help you if you're an alcoholic. I don't know about that. What you've got to do is dry yourself out, okay? Okay. In 1942, he was finally recognized for his creativity. And he worked at the Hamptons at a farm to work and deal with his demons. He obviously liked to be active all the time, all right? He could not deal with fame. He even derided Benton, saying he had to unlearn everything Benton had taught him. His mother came to settle him when he was living with Lee Krasner, who was an artist. She had given up her career because she realized that Benton was such a good artist, all right? And she figured if she took him out to the Hamptons and they lived on a little farm, he would stop drinking, which he did not do, okay? And so she left him in 1956. She couldn't take it anymore. She went to Paris. And it's a good thing she did. It's a good thing she did. Benton's mother came to help settle him down, all right, for Paris. All right, now, in August of that year, in 1956, he had a girlfriend. Lee had left, he picked up a girlfriend. Okay, now, he went to No, he went to the train station. The girlfriend was coming in on the train with a friend. And the friend said to the girlfriend, you know, he's drunk. Well, you can't get into the car. Oh, she said, no, he's all right. So they both got into the car. A few minutes later, they had an accident that threw his body up into a tree 50 feet above. In the tree is where his body landed. The girlfriend was okay, but the friend died. The lady that was, I believe, supposedly in the back died, but the girlfriend was okay, and she didn't want to get into the car with him. And they, like I said, they found Benton's body. It must have been such a force. His body was projected into a tree 50 feet up. Now, can you imagine? He went like a torpedo, for God's sake. What? Jackson Pollock.
You said Benton.
What?
You just said Benton.
Oh, I'm sorry, Benton. No, Jackson Pollock. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say Benton. Jackson Pollock. He died in 1956 as a result. Never lived to see how famous he became. Now, this early work was donated by Benton to the Smithsonian. He was told of Pollock's death by Willem de Kooning, but Benton was too distraught to go to the funeral. His expressive abilities astonish one even with the prosaic subject matter. The wagon train through the mountains is dark, surrounded and lit by a feeble moon to create a vortex thrumming with emotion. Now here is another one. Wait a minute, now why isn't this working? Here, composition. He came under, and this was in 1941, he came under the influence of Picasso, whose work he saw at the Museum of Modern Art. These biomorphic amoeba-like figures were forms that were also used by Joan Miro and Achille Gorky. Joan Miro was a Portuguese artist, by the way, or no, just Spanish artist. These forms writhe on the canvas. The paint is thickly applied, giving texture that adds to the emotion. And I'm going to show you one more. This one. War. Clearly influenced by Picasso's Guernica and the images that appeared during and after World War II. The human figures and the animal are tossed about to be impaled upon shards of a bombed-out building or the bridge girders that have already claimed lives. Notice all the skulls also, all right? This is a totemic image that emerges from the rubble on the right. The black web of lines was something that Picasso admired in American Indian art, and he also used it in his art. Now I'm going to show you something that's not as sickening as this is, all right? We'll look at something else. This was called Lavender Mist from 1950. The title was suggested by Clement Greenberg, who was a friend and critic of Pollock. And Pollock said, yeah, I like the name. I couldn't imagine being his friend. I just could not imagine that, all right. But anyway, he had originally called it Number 1, 1950. He was didn't think of a name, but he said, why don't you call it Lavender Mist, even though there's no lavender in it, okay? Where there was black, white, stone blue, silver, and orange, but it does have a very misty quality to it. Now, the lyrical use of color and thread-like web that spreads across the canvas. Now, this may look accidental, but this effect could only be created with a lot of concentration and skill and control of the material. He would do his paintings on the floor, and you had to know how to control the paint, okay? Now, there is a sense of movement as one tries to follow the lines. There is vibrancy, while it denies the third-dimensional reality of the Renaissance. Now, also, this painting can be hung any way and the meaning remains the same. You could hang it upside down. It'll still be the same. Okay? That's one thing about Pollock. All right, now, there is a story. There is also, I don't know, how many of you have ever seen the movie about Pollock when he was living with, all right, a few of you have seen it. In one scene, she invites people in on Thanksgiving Day. She wants him to have the joy of having friends around and having a normal meal. He came in, he looked at the table, was set with china and a tablecloth and whatnot. Everything, the turkey was there, took up the tablecloth and everything went on the floor. That was his reaction to the work that she put into all of this. It was like saying, "The hell with you, lady." But this is his reaction, and he must have been a real, oh God, I can't imagine someone like that. He belonged in a jail, quite frankly. The lecture I'm going to be doing is called, I'm going to be doing it on June 30th, that's June 30th at 7:30 at night. It will probably be a 2-hour lecture. It is called American Firsts. And I am going to trace all the first things that we have had in America, things that were never done anywhere. For example, the first turnpike was put in place in the 1783 from Philadelphia to Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And it was an actual turnpike. You know why they call it a turnpike? Because it was a pike. And if you wanted to get beyond, you had to pay, and then they would turn the pike. That's why it's called, all these are called turnpikes. We don't turn the pike anymore. We just race through with the and it's all done electronically, right? We're all going 70 miles an hour, zip, we're there. So that's one of the things. So I'm doing American Firsts. And it's going to be, as I said, at 7:30 at night on June 30th. I'm announcing it to everybody. If you really want to come, you should please register, because we only have about 65 seats available. So you call the Barron Arts here and register for it. Okay. All right. Thank you very much.